Well, we've talked about Liverpool in Turkey, so it might be an appropriate time to mention another miracle. See what I did there? Although miracle of Lyon is not on the same level as the miracle of Istanbul, is it, JJ?
I don't think we're quite at that level just yet, but it is extremely impressive, to see what Lyon have been doing so far, for sure.
For those who don't know the background to this, you might remember how Lyon, at the end of last season, or towards the end of last season, were effectively relegated, and then they were reinstated. They were relegated on financial grounds, then reinstated, and, well, during that process, they lost a lot of their key players, Andy, a lot of their key players. Just for financial reasons, they had to get rid of them. And so the depleted Lyon, though, JJ, is working, or are, if you prefer, working miracles at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, if you're calling sort of 5 1-0 victories so far this season a miracle, then I guess it does qualify. But no, I mean, Lyon are performing far above expectations. I think that's absolutely fair to say. Like I mentioned, you do have them sort of grinding out some of these results so far, but I think that's absolutely what they need to do, because Lyon don't have the same strength in depth that they've had in previous years. They have a very vastly experienced head coach in Paulo Fonseca, and I think Lyon are now adapting well to their new reality, and that's that they're no longer, necessarily one of the leading forces in French football, certainly not financially, and they're having to find ways to compete without being able to call upon the riches that their youth academy has previously provided, because they've had to sell all of the good, talented players that have come through that conveyor belt system over the years. So I feel like right now, this Lyon side has been put together extremely intelligently, not necessarily on a shoestring budget, but on a limited budget, and sort of mentioning sort of Liverpool as one of the kind of themes leading into this discussion. You've got, these kind of gems that have been uncovered, like Tyler Morton, who chipped in with, the winning goal over the weekend against Lille, who's helping them to, secure these really important victories early on to maintain this early season momentum that I don't think many people really expected them to have.
Andy, Tyler Morton there, somebody that many people listening wouldn't even have heard of. He came from over here in the UK, went to France, and is really not carrying Lyon, but nevertheless, he's so crucial to what's happening there at the moment with this depleted squad, as I say.
Yes, it's fair to say. And he was really the key signing this summer. And Paulo Fonseca made it clear when he was trying to persuade him to join from Liverpool that, I need you. You're the exact player that I need to get the game moving and to keep our game moving. So sort of someone who's deep lying, but a playmaker as well, a more modern sort of defensive-ish midfielder. And I think you've had him next to Tanner Tessman, who was too like Nemanja Matic to get in the team consistently when Matic was originally there and on it. Of course, Matic moved on last summer after Fonseca made it pretty clear in the back end of last season that he didn't really count on him anymore, and he didn't feel his legs could carry him through all the games. Tessman has also been excellent, having been there for a while. But I think the shape and the setup of the team is really important, because they've lost all those forward players that they don't really have a senior striker. So they signed Martin Satriano on loan from Lens, but he's just come off an ACL and is not going to score you lots of goals. There's no doubt about that. His record is showing, and he's been great. And in periods at Brest, he was really good in the team that qualified for the Champions League. But again, not a consistent goal scorer. So they've had to find different ways to find goals, and they're going to have to find different ways to find goals. Now, as JJ said, with all the 1-0 wins, that's very much a work in progress. But the fact is, if you're not letting in goals,
exactly,
you're giving yourself a great chance. So the structure seems important.
I thought JJ was a little bit sniffy about those 1-0s, given what we've said about the depletion of the squad, and particularly the forward lines.
Yeah.
Is it part of Fonseca's strategy then that we'll nick a goal somehow, but just make sure that we don't let in any goals?
Yeah, well, I think to be all pulling in the same direction and have that togetherness, I mean, that sort of lends itself to defensive excellence. And I think the structure and the fact that you've got Morton and Tessman in there is really important. for the shape as well. But look, I think if you look at that defensive record this season, when they've had 11 men on the pitch, they've not conceded a goal this season, as stands at the time of recording. That is amazing. It was just that 10 minutes at Rennes when Morton got sent off, and then they let in 3 in 10 minutes. That really was it was a bit of a red herring, really. It doesn't fit in with the rest of the season. They've got a new goalkeeper who's been great for them as well, Dominic Greif. 3 games, 3 clean sheets so far. It was great last season for Mallorca, and they picked him up for 4 million. The Slovak, which is a terrific pickup for them. But I do think when you look at not just the structure of the team, but the mood of the team, who is so important there is Corentin Tolisso, the captain, who was a youth product originally, went away to Bayern Munich, won some stuff, got injured, won the World Cup, came back. And for the first couple of seasons, you looked at Tolisso. I've always loved Tolisso, and I'm not shying away from the fact that I'm quite a Tolisso apologist. But I was definitely at the point where I thought, like, a season and a half in, he's cooked. He's done, like, physically, he's not able to do this anymore. And he's been away, and he's worked very, very hard on his fitness to get himself to a level where he can play all the time. He was excellent last season. And this season, they've kind of needed him even more because he's been popping up in these advanced positions because they don't really have that striker to speak of. And I think Tolisso will be down to him to contribute a lot of those goals. But it's the off-the-pitchness as well. So how he connects as someone who's a Lyon product, as someone who connects the younger players, the more experienced players. He's got enough English to connect the non-French speaking players like Morton, like Ruben Kluivert, like the Czechs who've turned up, Schultz and Karabets, who I think, especially Schultz, I think will develop into
Ruben
something
Kluivert.
more. Yeah,
that's the name.
The son of
the other son
of Patrick. Yeah.
Oh wow,
yeah, the young son of Patrick. So I think it's really interesting his role in bringing everyone together, because you can see the togetherness all the times. And this is something actually that didn't just happen under Fonseca. I think this started when Pierre Sage was the coach. This real sort of, we've got our backs against the wall in the dressing room when they were trying to get away from relegation and then eventually ended up qualifying for Europe. I think a little bit of that still reigns. Now, interestingly, some of the players who they've lost, who you might consider not a big deal, so someone like Mamadou Diawara, who went on loan to Standard Liège, and particularly Sal Kumbedi, who went to Wolfsburg. Now, people will look at that and go, well, he's the reserve right back. You know, he's behind Ainsley Maitland-Niles. Who cares? He was the guy who started all the chants in the dressing room, who kept everyone up, who was the epitome, really, of a great teammate. And now he's gone. Who's the guy who you always see starting the chants in the dressing room? Is Kalis Mera. He's 18 years old. And yet,
wow.
I think that's something that's always been a thing at Lyon, that young players are not just, you know, you think young players like come into the team and, you know, they do well enough and they get themselves a place and they start more and more and more. Young players at Lyon have always been encouraged, because they're such a part of the personality of the club, to be leaders as well. Don't just turn up and sit in the corner and just say nothing. Show a bit of personality as well. And that's really important. We're seeing that with him and Matisse Di Carvalho, who's looked really, really good when he's come in and started playing as well. I think this goes back to, I mean, this is modern life, I suppose. We sort of judge ourselves on where we were at various financial crashes. But if you go back to the last Lyon financial crash, when they spent all that money under Claude Puel, when he was not just a coach, but the general manager, and then they had to sell like the likes of Lisandro Lopez and get rid of Michel Bastos and players like that, and they had to shed loads of wages. And they've done that in an even more dramatic fashion, losing 2/3 of the wage bill this summer. I think what came out of that is, if you go back, what came out of that is players like Tolisso, players like Lacazette, players like Samuel Umtiti. Those players came through because Lyon have always lent on their academy, and they didn't have any option because they were so broke. but to lean on their academy even more heavily than they did before. And so what's happening at the moment is kind of the same thing. You know, it's not perfect. It's not a team that's going to win the league or anything like that, but it is a team that is building solid foundations from the things that have always made Lyon Lyon.
Andy says it's not a team that's going to win the league, JJ, but of course they could win the league if they can keep up these 1-0 victories that you were so sniffy about. And I wonder whether that is the real question now, where, you know, it's still fairly new into this season. Can Lyon keep the momentum up?
Now, just for the record, I'm not sort of looking down on the 1-0 victories. I think, you know, it's a crucial part of building
French
up
football?
momentum. I mean, not necessarily a French football, because actually it's been quite a goal-filled season so far. I think there's been very, very few, a record low number actually of goalless draws so far in the Championnat. So, you know, that's definitely one thing for sort of French football stands like myself to be shouting from the rafters about. But I think for me, the big question is, at what point during the season does, you know, the loss of perhaps one or two players, possibly through injury rather than suspension, start to impede Lyon's ability to pick up these points domestically or to progress a bit further in their continental adventure? I think there's definitely an argument that they do need to make hay while the sun shines and continue to pick up points while they can, whether that's domestically, whether that's on the continental stage. I do believe that the lack of an out-and-out number 9, unless they can address that with a joker signing before the winter window, or perhaps they tackle that in the winter window itself, I do think that lack of sort of an established goal scoring presence will hinder them a little bit as we sort of enter into the winter period. And what they do perhaps in January will ultimately, for me, sort of define how their season looks. But I think right now at this moment in time, with the form that they've been able to put together, the defensive meanness that Andy was talking about as well, you know, I do think that, you know, they have the ability to pick up and to continue to put points on the board, you know, and the further that they can go in Europe and the more competitive that they can be, you know, in Ligue, the better ultimately, you know, their season is going to look sort of as we head into the final third. I just wonder what impact, you know, maybe losing sort of one or two players perhaps to injury, not necessarily to suspension, might have on them, and how that might trip up, you know, some of this excellent momentum that they've built up so far. Because, you know, as Andy mentioned, you've got sort of unlikely sources chipping in with goals at the moment. You've got Tessman, you've got Morton, you've got Tolisso on the score sheet so far. There is going to be a much heavier reliance on the likes of Malik Fofana as the season goes on, as sort of the star turn in attack. So I do think that, you know, there are potential weaknesses that are yet to be uncovered. But given, I guess, how sort of fragile Lyon were expected to be at the beginning of the campaign, they've showed, you know, a massive amount of resilience so far that's, you know, really taken, you know, some teams by surprise. And, you know, I think with the exception of sort of being picked apart late on by Rennes, you know, after sort of losing the numerical balance, that is probably the only time really where we've seen what could potentially be an obstacle for this Lyon side as the months continue in the season.